Hello and welcome to the Denver Homes Market Report. This is Ricky Schoonover, host of this show and your local realtor with 8Z Real Estate. Thank you very much for tuning in. You have found the Denver Homes Market Report, Denver's monthly real estate podcast, where we talk about all things Mile High City and real estate. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the previous episode that we had last month. We were talking about the 5 biggest things. We kind of spoke to a few things, talking about 5 biggest questions from buyers and sellers. And a lot of it came down to price. You know, pricing prices have come down over the past year or so, about 5-10%, depending on certain areas. We also talked about presentation, curb appeal. We talked about merchandising, professional photography. We talked about marketing with social media and social media blasts and, sending out postcards and walking the neighborhoods. And I really have a process that I go through. Anyone that's worked with me, I have a certain process. When I launch a home for sale, there's from about 2 weeks before we actually go live all the way up until my first open house, and how I do all that, I really have sort of built over time and sort of perfected this opening weekend and then my grand opening house weekend. So anyway, we talked a little bit about that. So today, let's get into something else. Well, before I do that, first of all, quick shout out to the Arts District on Santa Fe. If you guys all know, I really love the Arts District on Santa Fe. Just had a party at my house, a little community event, and it was really, really successful. But I really want to point out is we are now at the first Thursday of the month, and tomorrow will be First Friday. It's the large First Friday where they close down Santa Fe, which is huge, right? It's a main thoroughfare through here, Denver. If you know anything about Denver, it's a main thoroughfare where a lot of people are coming in and out of downtown, and they use either Calumet to go south, or they use Santa Fe to come north. So that's a huge thoroughfare right there. And on a Friday night, they close it down. And they close it around about 2 o'clock so everyone can start getting set up with the vendors and everything else. And then it's closed all the way till about 10 o'clock at night. So this is the big First Friday. And I really would love to have you come down to the district and enjoy it. There's going to be, people out on the streets. It's going to be fun. So just come out, go to the galleries, check it out, go to the food trucks. Make sure you stop by Mystic Lounge, go have a cocktail over there, go say hi to Chris over at Renegade Brewery. And one other thing, and I kind of plugged this on my last podcast, but I want to do it again, because I think a lot of people get kind of like, they think that the Arts District is just from 6th Avenue till 10th or 11th, but really it's not. I mean, that is sort of the core of the Arts District, but venture outside the district, go in a block. If you're on Inca Street around I think it's about 8th or 9th Avenue, go in a block. There's another gallery in there. There's some other places there, or go south and go along Santa Fe, and you can stop at Town Hall and have a cocktail there. There's a Queen City Collective coffee, and there's a cocktail lounge right there. So go in there and get a cocktail, and then continue on up a little bit further, and you'll get to another gallery, which is that's actually the name of it, another gallery. But check out another gallery, and then there's Walter's Pizzeria, which is up on the further corner up there. So anyways, the district is more than just from 6th Avenue to 10th Avenue, but you do have to kind of get out there and adventure, and there's probably not as many lights and as many people, but it could be a lot of fun. All right, so First Friday, August 1st Friday, that is the big one. Every First Friday is an art walk, but the biggest one, and one that most people recognize, is the one on the August First Friday where the streets are closed down. So come out and check that out. All right, so let's get into today's podcast. What are we going to talk about? Let's talk about social media. I have seen recently, and to be honest, I sell real estate. So my algorithm is probably telling me more or showing me more real estate related things maybe than the average person. But what I've seen recently kind of cracks me up. It is supposed, and I am convinced that probably 50% or even more, 60% of the posts are just robots that are posting these things to get us to fight, right? To get the public to kind of argue back and forth in the comments. I almost just look at the post and then I go to the comments just to see, what everyone has to say about it and just kind of laugh at it. But this particular one, I think I should, kind of talk to you about a little bit. And it comes down to, it'll post to say something like, I'm a buyer and I had my home inspected before I bought it, and I found out that it needed a new roof and it was going to be like, $20,000, and the seller wouldn't budge. So what should I do? And then you go to the comments immediately, and people are like, walk away, do this, do that, all these rash decisions, right? And I was like, you know what? Wait a minute, take a step back. Hopefully you're being guided by a professional realtor who's been doing this day in and day out, and they're in the trenches every day. Hopefully the seller on the other side is also being guided by somebody that can kind of explain to them like, hey, we are in a buyer's market, which we've already talked about, and kind of explain to them that the buyers do have a little more power, but also keep the buyer in check as well, right? Like talk to the buyer and have a consultation with them and say, okay, yeah, the seller has given us a little hard time on this inspection item, and it does need a new roof. We've had 2 roofers come out and they've both said that it needs a new roof. So we know it needs a new roof, but there's other things we can do to keep level heads to prevail. And one of those is to have the seller reach out to their insurance company and say, hey, do some research and see if there was any major hail events or any other sort of weather events, a wind event, something that they could attribute this damage to, where they could get some help from their insurance. That's one step you can do. Also, from the buyer's side and the buyer's agent, get into the MLS and see what other homes are available that are comparable to this one, that are maybe either a competitive market analysis, which competitive market means those are homes that are currently for sale as well. So look and see, maybe this is a good deal. Maybe the seller is not off track. Maybe the offer was low and lower than it could have been or should have been. And they accepted it because they had other things extenuating going on, but they needed to get moving on their life. So they accepted your offer, but now they're not willing to put on this $20,000 roof. The roof's gonna have to get done. Let's just tell you the bottom line. Insurance companies, the mortgage company, everybody's gonna get involved, and the roof is gonna have to get done. Whether the buyer takes care of it after the close, or the seller takes care of it before the close, or somewhere in between. Like in my case, when I bought my first house here in Denver, my husband and I, we bought our first house here in Denver, it needed a new roof. But timing wise, it was kind of a busier market. It was like 2016, kind of a busier market. And it was kind of difficult to get a roofer out there while we were in contract. We only had 2 weeks left in contract. So what we did is we accepted the seller and I, we chose this Reitz Roofing. We said, okay, write a check to Reitz Roofing and then give it to me at closing. And then that way, when Reitz Roofing finally gets scheduled and gets out there, then I could just give them that check to pay for my roof. So that's how we did it. So there's a bunch of different ways to kind of skin that cat, so to speak. And also just taking a look at the market and seeing if maybe the buyer is getting a really good deal. Maybe the buyer and seller come to an agreement, something like what we did, where the seller will be like, okay, you know what, let's pick out the roofing company. I'm not willing to pay $20,000, but I will put $10,000 down, and then towards it. I'll give you a check for $10,000, and then the buyer would come up with $10,000 for the rest of the roof, or whatever it might be. But it's so funny when you look on social media and you see that it needs a new roof, and the seller doesn't want to do it, and then they'll all walk away. Well, that might be the right decision, but that's not the point. It might be the right decision. Maybe you do cancel and move on and go on to another house, but there's so many questions to be answered. There's so many other layers that you can go through when you are being guided by a professional on the seller side, a professional realtor that's helping that seller stay level-headed, understand the market, understand where they are, understand that roof is going to have to be replaced. And if this buyer walks, guess what? Now you're gonna have to replace the roof on your own, because the last thing you want to do is start leaking. Then you have a bunch of other problems with your house. So that roof is going to be changed. If this buyer walks away, now you have to change the roof on your own because that buyer's not there. And then the other one is with the buyer as well, right? Looking at the market, looking at your offer, seeing what other condition the home is in. Maybe it has a brand new furnace. Maybe the foundation is in fantastic shape. Maybe it's got a new AC system. Maybe they just spent $80,000 putting all new windows in. Whatever the case might be. But you have to look at the real estate transaction in a holistic approach. If you're just getting a social media text that says, seller won't replace the roof, what do you do? And then you go to the comments and everybody, like almost all of them were like, you walk away, you do this, you do that, you sue the seller. I was like, wait a minute, why do you sue the seller? Like they're not, you can't sue the seller in this case, in this particular case. If they lied to you or they hid something from you, then you found out from after the fact and you can prove that, then you probably have a case. But that's not what this post was all about. This is just basically the buyer's in contract, has an inspection, finds out it needs a new roof, and then what do I do? And then you go to the comments, and that's where I saw all of these comments. So anyway, what my point is really making sure, and this is really where it comes down to having a professional realtors working on either side, right? Working with the buyers, working with the sellers. And there's a reason why I don't double side deals. Like if I'm representing the seller, I'm going to be representing you in the sale of your home all the way through closing. If another buyer comes in through one of my open houses or calls me on the sign or whatever the case may be, I will refer them out. I'll be like, hey, you know what? I have 185 agents here at 8Z thereabouts, and here's some good agents. Give them a call. If you connect with any of these agents, great, you can work with them, and they will guide you on your side as the buyers, because I have a commitment with my seller. I know too much about my seller situation. I can't not step away and say, okay, now I'm no longer representing you, and now I'm not representing the buyer. I'm going to do this as a transaction broker. I just don't do that. I just can't. I know it's legal. I know it's ethical, but I just can't do it. For me, it doesn't work for me. So I would refer that buyer out to another agent if they want to, or they can choose any agent they'd like, but they're going to have their own representation walking in through the deal and keeping those emotions in check, right? So when that does come up where it needs a new roof and the seller is hesitant because they just spent $80,000 putting in new windows or whatever it was, where they're like, no, we've given enough, we don't want to put on this new roof. And you have to look at all angles, all situations from a holistic approach. You know, what's the value of the home? What's the offer that you offered? You know, are there comparables that you would prefer to go buy if you can't get this new roof? And then who knows, when you go to, you give up on this deal and you walk away and you go to the other house, it may have a new roof or it may need a new roof. And if it doesn't need a roof, maybe it needs a furnace, or maybe it needs an AC, or maybe it has some foundation issues that need to be taken care of. Whatever the case, no home is going to be perfect. And if you can keep level heads to prevail on that particular deal, it's probably self-serving it's probably more serving for the seller to get that transaction done. They've already got the buyer under contract, and it's probably better for that buyer to buy that house. And you have the buyers and sellers come to a meeting of the minds. And I had a similar situation like this. You guys might remember my property that I sold not too long ago over at 715 Galapago, as we say it here in Denver, where we had it on the market for $1.2 million, and we got an offer that first weekend. They did their home inspection, and they found a section of the home that my sellers had not even checked. The home used to be like a garage, like where they used to repair batteries at one point. It was built in the 1800s. So it had a lot of different lives. It was a grocery store at one point, residence at one point, apartments at one point. Now it's a big, loft with commercial area in the bottom. And at one point there was a garage where you could pull your car in, and underneath there was like a bay where you would work on the car from underneath. And they hadn't been in there. When they bought the house, they went in there, looked at it, and there was nothing there. It was just a bunch of, old, empty space or whatever. And they had no use for it. So they hadn't gone in there. Well, when the new buyers came in and they had a structural engineer come out because of the age of the property, they went in there and they'd found some issues where it wasn't detrimental. The house wasn't falling down or anything, but it was a wall that probably needed a little sister wall built up next to it and some other things. Anyway, it was pretty expensive and it needed a new roof as well. So it needed a roof, and my sellers kind of recognized that, like, hey, it probably needs a new roof because we have hail here in Denver. And but we didn't know about the structural part. And so anyway, there was a ask or a inspection objections that came in from the buyer. It was substantially more than my sellers were anticipating or thinking. But when we got into the nuts and bolts of it and we started reading through the report, the structural engineer report, and then they went into that little service bay area, which they hadn't seen in 30 years. And they're like, oh, okay, we see what they're talking about. There was a wall that had some pressure on it. It was like sort of starting to bow a little bit and needed some support. So they're like, okay, with the new roof and having to fix this part and give some support and build that wall, we understand. So we didn't give the buyer the full amount, but we came back with an inspection resolution, which we submitted over to the buyer, and the buyer's like, okay, I'm happy with that. So we were able to come with a happy medium. If we were not being guided, if my clients were not being guided by me and the buyer wasn't being guided by their realtor, it very easily could have just blown up the deal. And now my sellers are retired. That was their retirement. They're retired. They're on their own now. They're doing great. And I still check in with them here and there. And the buyer, I just ran into him at the local taco shop. I was over at Taco Selene not too long ago. And there is the buyer, the new buyer. And I was like, oh, hey, what's going on? How are you? And he's like, oh, how you liking the house? And we talked about it, his child who was, loving the new home, and his wife and everything else. And so everything worked out. Even though there was unexpected expenses that came up in the middle of our transaction, we were able to keep level heads. They were being professionally guided by their realtor. I was professionally guiding my sellers, and we were able to get the buyer and seller together, and everybody's happy. So the moral of the story is, if you're in a real estate transaction, and whether you're the buyer or the seller, and something comes up, then there's a reason that we are professionals. There's a reason that we're trained. We go to constant continuing education courses where we learn how to diffuse these situations or sort of find the happy medium for everybody to make the real estate market build trust and maintain trust in the market. If we don't have any trust in the market, then everyone's just going to back out of the deal because of this, or cancel because of that, or a seller's going to cancel the deal because they had another buyer bring another offer. All these sort of things that just don't happen because we're guiding our clients to make sure that we're good faith, right? Once you've accepted the offer, buyer and seller, once they've accepted the offer, section 29, I believe it is, where it is good faith, says that the seller is not going to then try to sell the home to somebody else just because they got a better offer. They're going to, in good faith with this contract, since they're signing this contract, in good faith, try to sell this home to the buyer. And the buyer, the same thing. Once they sign the contract, in good faith, they are going to buy this home. That's why the seller is taking it off the market and not allowing other people to buy it, because this buyer is showing in good faith that they're going to purchase this home. Now, that doesn't mean if something comes up and you can't get it negotiated, that you can't walk away. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is when you have professionals guiding you and making that decision or helping you make that decision, you're getting the information and then you're making a holistic decision over the overall transaction and where your deal is and where the market is and where your offer is been accepted and where the seller is in their situation and getting through the deal. So that's basically it. All right, I'm going to close up today's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. First Friday tomorrow, August 1st Friday, Santa Fe Drive will be closed down. So go check it out if you're anywhere in the Denver metro area. It's going to be a great party. Other than that, thank you very much for tuning in. This is Ricky Schoonover, 8Z Real Estate and host of Denver's monthly real estate podcast, the Denver Homes Market Report. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It's either right there or right there. Hit that subscribe button for me, and we'll see you next month.